Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today. We are going to be broadcasting our usual time on Fridays at 10 a.m. And today we're going to be talking real estate as usual, but the topic that we are bringing in today to chat about is timelines when you're buying a home. And then Delaney brought in some mortgage info that sounds pretty exciting about contingency busters. So tell us just a sneak peek on that while I close my door so that way we don't have to hear my dog barking.
No worries. No worries. So yeah, we're going to talk about a really cool program that is going to change it. It is changing the game for buyers right now in this market. So I'm excited to tell you guys about that.
Cool. All right, so let's get to it. One of the first things that we wanted to make sure that everyone's aware of is that when you are buying a home, there are some timelines that you need to be aware of. And all of these timelines are negotiable, by the way. I see these, pretty standard as, what we're going to cover with you guys as far as like the number of days and things like that. But just know that all of this could be negotiated depending on the buyer's circumstance and the seller's circumstance. So it would also help you get an idea as to what you need to do to get ready for that home purchase. So the very first thing you're going to need is an earnest money deposit. So what is this? I like to explain this as like your very first initial investment into buying your new home. Okay, it's the first check that you're going to write out towards that investment, towards that purchase, towards your new home. And it's basically just showing the seller that not only are you willing and interested, but you're also, ready to put some money into the deal to go ahead and bind the transaction. And this is typically also called the escrow funds because it is held in escrow. So it doesn't go directly to the seller. It leaves the buyer, yes, because it needs to be held in escrow. And then at the end of the transaction towards closing, it gets given back to them in the form of a credit, at the time of closing. Now, earnest money deposits, I've seen them as low as $1,000 on some of the lower price points of a home, and I've seen them as high as up to 5% on some of the new construction homes, when they need to get built. So it really just depends on the sales price. It also depends on whether it's a resale transaction or a brand new construction. Typically with new construction, you're going to need a little bit more or a lot more, from 1% to 5%, some of these builders would ask. And then one of the things is that typically it is given all up front, but within the agreement, we also have seen timelines where you could actually extend that, where you might actually do, half of the earnest money deposit due up front, and then maybe the other half within 2 weeks or a month. It really just depends on the situation. Have you seen something similar, Delaney?
Absolutely. I am so sorry. Somebody wants to call. We have some special guests today. We have your puppy. We have people calling. So, but yes, on the earnest money deposit, I have seen everything you're saying is spot on. And I like to tell people when they're like, why do I have to give money up front? I always say it shows a little bit of skin in the game. So, putting that money down, reserving that home. But like you said, it's negotiable. I've seen on a couple contracts I have right now where the binder is kind of split, like you were saying. Maybe they give $1,000 up front, then they give another $1,000. So that is negotiable. And then, timelines, things like that. One thing I like to mention is on an earnest money deposit, many people think, oh, I'll get that back at closing, as far as like in an actual check. That is just applied as a credit towards what you need for closing. The one thing we want to keep in mind with the earnest money deposit is most of the time for us to give that credit back, we have to show that you gave that money. So you always want to do either a paper check, a wire transfer, something like that, so that we can go to the title company who's going to hold those funds while you're in the contract, and we can get a wire receipt from them showing that you gave that money and it has your name. And we'd also get your bank statement to show that it came out of your account. So we don't want to do cash. We don't want to do cash in a money order and then give that. If you do, we just have to show that minus in your bank account, and then we can use it, but always doing something with that paper trail to show your name on it is always best.
Yeah, and it is critical that we get a deposit. Like I have seen that be part of the requirements for any kind of compliance within my files. We always have to have that paper trail. The lender also needs it. It's a pretty important document to have that receipt because in essence it's really showing that you have some skin in the game, that you're actually putting some money towards the purchase of this. And I've never seen this waive. This is one of those things that you really do need to have some skin in the game. It could be as little as $1,000 if the price point allows it, and it could be as much as 5% on some of the larger purchases, or how should I say, higher price homes.
And one thing I'm so sorry. One thing I forgot to mention really quick is many people say, well, I'm selling a house or I'm liquidating from my 401k. I don't have that $5,000, $1,000 up front. So one thing that many people do is maybe they'll have a family member gift them the money for the earnest money deposit. That is 100% allowed, no issues there, but we would just need to get that paper trail as well. So we'd want to get the wire receipt showing it came from the gift donor's account, and then we would get them to sign a letter. So we have a lot of options there as well.
Nice. And I like the creativity because, obviously, if you have the means to put that yourself, do it. But if you need to have, a gift fund, then that's a possibility. That's great. Now, the second thing that you want to be ready with is your home inspection funds. Okay. And I wanted to show you guys kind of what you could expect. Let me just share my screen real quick. Pricing. Okay. And this is one of the inspection companies that is here locally in Jacksonville. I've used them before. Can you guys see that? Did that pop up in the screen? Okay.
Yes.
So this is, pretty standard pricing. I used House Scan Inspections and some of the other inspection companies here in town. But what you could expect to pay on a standard home inspection would greatly vary depending on the size of the home that you're inspecting. That would make sense, right? It has to do with the time that the inspector might have to invest during that inspection and what else needs to be looked at. So, for example, recently I've sold a condo and it was only about 1,200 square feet. And that was actually, one that wasn't too terribly expensive to inspect. And some of it has to deal with when they were built. I think mine was actually newer. So that was only $350. And they look at some of the components that are more like structured for the home, things like electrical, plumbing, AC, things that are, truly important. You don't want to skip that because these are the types of things that could be costly to have to repair or replace later down the road. So if you have the opportunity to see, that those things might be coming up while you're still in negotiations, it just sets you in a much better position, in the long run. But so what you could expect is as little as $350 up to, let's say you have a 4,000 square foot home that you're buying, and it was built in the 1924 to 1948, for example. Let's say a historical home in Avondale or something like that. Those will cost more to inspect. Those would generally be about $740 to inspect. So somewhere between $350 and $740 would be what you want to prepare for as far as your general home inspection. Now, beyond that, I will say that there are other things that you may want to inspect, and Delaney can talk a little bit about what the lenders require. But I also, besides the standard home inspection, I usually order a WDO inspection, which WDO stands for wood destroying organisms. It's real important here in Florida because of our climate to have one of those. And you obviously would want to use some logic. If it's a home that's older, don't skip it. But if it's a brand new construction, just you'll have to call your good judgment on that. I err on the side of caution, so I would say definitely get it. And those are kind of like the price points that you would expect. And then, of course, like I said, would have to deal with how big or small the home is and how much time the inspector would need.
Absolutely. And I have two things on the home inspection. So the first one is very important. And obviously most, realtors and your realtor would know this. Oh my gosh, happy St. Patrick's Day. I
Oh,
forgot
by the
to
way,
mention-
yes.
that's why that is me going all over in my tangents. But yes,
A lot going on.
side note on that. But with the home inspection, you do not need, nor do you want to send that to your lender. We do not need your home inspection. What we do is order an appraisal, and we'll get into that in a second. But you have to remember, anything you send your lender, they cannot unsee. So we want to make sure that the home inspection, for example, if the home inspection came over and it says that, let's say it's on a septic system, and it says that that septic system has some items that need to be repaired, I cannot unsee those items. So you just want to make sure that you're only handling that between you, the seller, and your real estate agent. And off of that home inspection, that is where you can negotiate repairs with the seller based off of that. So we'll talk about the timelines of the home inspection, and the earnest money deposit is typically due within 3 days of signing the contract, right?
Totally. Yeah. So that's kind of like the standard timeline. It's 3 days for earnest money deposit. Again, that could be extended if you needed to. I've seen cases where they might be pulling money from stocks or a 401k, and they do need a little bit more time to get all of the funds. So what I would recommend in that situation is maybe still give the seller, or put in escrow something within 3 days, but then you can also supplement that within 7 days, so however many days to have the full earnest money deposit given. But technically, yes, it's 3 days that you have to give that. And then with the home inspection, standard is 10 days, but I have seen that shorten, and the shorter the better, because I think it just gives the seller a little bit more comfort knowing that this is not going to take forever to get inspected. We want to know that you're still committed to it, that you're going to have a full, thorough due diligence period to look at what you're buying, feel comfortable with it, and let's move on towards closing. So the home inspection is typically 10 days, but I have seen those shorten as low as half, maybe 5 days. And then again, that's something that you would deal with me directly as your realtor, or deal with your realtor. The lender doesn't need to see that part of it.
Well, and then my question is, because I had a client who, they went under contract, they gave the binder deposit, they did the home inspection, and they decided with their agent that there were too many things on that home inspection that would need to be done to get the home where they needed it, or where it would pass an appraisal, which we'll talk about next. How long does a buyer have typically to back out of a sales contract and still get their earnest money deposit back? Does that coincide with the home inspection timeline?
Totally. Yeah. So that's the due diligence period. It's kind of like a time for you to just make sure that the home is in the condition that you would be accepting. So it doesn't have to be in perfect conditions. It has to be in a condition that you accept it. And if it's not, then that would be grounds for a breakup, which we don't like to see. But if you are just like, no, that AC was way too old. But before we break up, I will try to make amends. I would try to go, if I'm with the buyer, representing the buyer, I would try to negotiate with the listing agent to see if there's anything that we could do to maybe negotiate the repairs, negotiate the replacement, maybe lower the sales price because we just found that that AC is on its last leg and it's about to break down, or, just try to come up with some sort of resolution for that. But yeah, definitely, if the home inspection shows that the home is just not in the condition that you're ready to proceed with the transaction, that would be enough grounds for a breakup, and then in which case you would get your earnest money deposit. But once those timelines are done, that you can go back and say, oh, by the way, because of the AC or the water heater or the roof, then I want my money back, because then that home inspection period is done.
Well, and the last thing I'll mention on this, a little personal disclosure. When we bought our first home in 2015, the importance of having a home inspection is, it is so important. That $750, that $350, to have that peace of mind that the home that you're buying, which is most likely the biggest purchase that you're going to make, is in good standing. And like Angela has mentioned, if there's items on there, it doesn't mean, oh my gosh, the AC's older. Oh my gosh, they have a couple things with pest inspections we have to get corrected. Those things we can go with the seller. So in 2015, we bought a home and we had a really good home inspector. And I'm not saying that the seller hid this on purpose at all. But what I will say is there was in the garage a wheelbarrow that was covering an open exposed thing of wiring. Like almost think about it like your dryer hookups. It kind of looked like that. And he was looking for something in the garage. It was a little bit of an older home, and he moved it and found it, and it actually had copper wiring. So that is it's a way older type of wiring. It is extremely difficult to obtain insurance on a home that has that type of wiring. So because of our home inspector, we actually requested from the seller for them to rewire the entire home.
Oh my God. Wow.
Yeah,
so what a great time.
Right. And so when we went to them, the seller was like, no, we don't want to. And our agent was like, well, you know, you're going to have a hard time regardless getting this home sold because of that. And so they actually rewired the home for us. So having that good home inspector is extremely important, especially when there's, you know, you just never know. So that was my little personal story on how important that home inspection was.
Totally. Especially with things that you can visually like see, like the wiring, that's something behind the walls like that. You know, they're as good of a realtor as we might be, or loan officers, we can like see things that are behind the walls or like under the sinks. If there are any leaks going on, or you know, water heaters, air conditioning, there's just a certain type of expertise that a home inspector brings that's going to add more value and take the surprise element out of the equation. I try to, as much as possible, eliminate surprises. I only want good surprises, but even then, you know, you just want to make this a process that's going to be very predictable, very calm, very, you know, just assuring for both buyers and sellers. So I think that's important to make sure that you know what you're looking for and what you will be getting from the home inspection.
Perfect.
Let's go on with appraisals. Now, this is a big one. I always like hold my breath. I'm like hoping, please appraise the value that we're under contract for. And for the most part, I've had really good fortune recently where my appraisals have come in just fine. But I know that this is one of those things that, you know, it could make or break a deal. It really could. You know, and that's more important when you're taking on a mortgage than anything else. So the appraisal is more, first of all, it's ordered by the mortgage company, okay? But it's a requirement for you to have one when you're the buyer. So the seller never sees the appraisal and never orders it, but the buyer is the one that's most involved with that. So tell us about the appraisal process, Delaney.
Absolutely. So the appraisal is something where we would order this as soon as we get the contract. Now, I have had some buyers request that we wait until the home inspection is back because you do pay for the appraisal up front. And the reason for that, now the appraisal works like the earnest money deposit as far as a credit. So we would show that you paid that up front, and then we would show on the final closing documents that you paid that. And so you're not being charged twice. You're not being charged up front and at closing. But yes, the lender requires an appraisal for one simple reason. Well, two, you want to make sure the home is in good standing, that there's no big issues. That's why we don't require the home inspection, because the home inspection can have on it a lot of things that, as far as the lender, may not be concerned with. So the appraisal, the appraiser is specifically trained in your loan type to go out and make sure the property meets minimum standards for the lender based off of your loan type. So that is kind of the first reason. The second thing is the lender is lending you money on this home based off of whatever price you're paying for it. So we need to make sure from the lender perspective that that home is worth what you're paying for. If you go to purchase a home and it gets appraised and it's $25,000 lower than what it's under contract for, then we would have to figure out and negotiate so that we can get in a spot where that value makes sense. If we're talking about costs for an appraisal, it's typically anywhere for a primary residence, you're looking at about $500 to $700. The reason for that is the appraiser goes out and does an inspection. They're required to take specific photos. They're required to check specific things, but that appraiser has to do their homework before they get to the property. So they have to pull comparable properties. They have to show other properties that are active on the market to support that value. The appraisal is pretty much a 26 to 35 page report. So it does, even though they can pop in everything and it probably populates on the form, it is quite a bit of work. So the appraiser is not typically going to go to the property without having some sort of payment up front. Again, skin in the game. The other reason why we need payment up front is if you do order an appraisal and we do the deal does not go through, you guys, agree to terminate the contract, that appraiser still did the report. So they still do need to get paid on that. So that's why we are paying for that up front. But based off of your loan type, that would see the different things that they're looking for. For example, on a VA loan with veterans or active duty, it is required to have that pest inspection. And there's certain things like that. Where there could be additional inspections and lender required inspections, could just depend on what the appraiser notates in that report. So let's go back to the septic example. Based off of your loan type, the mortgage company may require that septic inspection no matter what, based off of the type of loan you're doing. On other types of loans, if you have a septic and on the new home and the appraiser doesn't notate anything wrong with the septic, we may not need one. So I always prep my buyers up front. The appraisal is that $500 to $700. But when that report comes back, if that report is subject to repairs or additional inspections, those additional inspections are lender required to clear that appraisal and close on your home.
Right. Right. And, and one of the things that I want to also mention about the appraisal is that it's considered an art and not a science. Okay, so there's a lot of appraiser's discretion put onto this report. Certain things are very exact and then certain things are abstract. It really just goes into their expertise as to how they assess value. And, so we do want to have good appraisers. We do want to have good comps. It has to make sense. But just know that, the house has to appraise for the same value that you are buying it for, if you're taking on a mortgage, for this to work out with your lender. Is that right?
Yes. Now there are a few examples, like if the appraisal comes in low, maybe your agent Angela would go to the sellers and ask them, the appraisal came in low, we need to drop the price. Another thing that we could do is, based off of how much money you're putting down, you could roll that difference into the loan. So basically, if you're getting a home that is $400,000 and it comes back at $350,000, you can, if you sign something stating, I know I'm buying a home that appraised under value, we are in many cases still able to close on that home. That's far and few between, but you are able to do that in certain instances.
Wow, that's really competitive. I've very rarely seen that, but that's great that that's an option. Typically, if the appraisal comes in low, we would really have to have a heart-to-heart conversation with the seller and say, look, we sold it for higher than what is valued for, and we need to mediate that difference. So whether that means that the buyer, if they have the means to, would make up the gap, like actually bring that difference to the closing table in addition to their down payment and their closing costs, that would be one way of solving it. The other way of solving it would be for the seller to reduce their price to the appraised value, which is, it's really tough, to have a conversation like that with a seller. But at the same time, I know that, when homes, and this is more of a concern when we sell homes for higher than the asking price in this type of market, it's great that they sell so fast and for so much higher than their asking price. But if there is a mortgage involved, I always tell my sellers, just remember, it has to appraise for what we are agreeing to sell it for. And if it doesn't, then we might just have to have a conversation about the price again. Fortunately, I haven't had to do those, and I'm really blessed. I knock on wood, make sure that stays like that, because it could really make or break a deal. But I'm glad to hear that Delaney has some ways to work around that too.
Absolutely. And the last thing I'll mention is, if you're buying a home cash, there's no lender required, like in the equation. So you wouldn't be required to have an appraisal. I'm not sure, because obviously being a lender, I don't deal with cash transactions. Do cash buyers still do an appraisal in your experience? Or they
not necessarily? They could if they wanted to, but I don't see very many doing them. As long as they're okay with the price, and they have the means for it, they go ahead and pay it. Maybe someone that's a little bit more careful on their investment might actually look at comps in the area to make sure that they're not overpaying. And as a realtor, I can assist them with that, just to give them enough of a comfort level to know that, yes, you're making this investment, but so many other people in the same subdivision have paid just as much as you have or more for this type of home. That should be enough to give them the reassurance. But if they need more than that, then obviously they could hire an appraiser and have an appraisal report done. But because it's not a requirement, we just don't see that very often.
Okay, cool.
And then let's talk about what's next. Oh, the lender requirements. Okay, you talked about those. With VA, we always have to have the WDO inspection. So are those not required with conventional loans and FHA loans, Delaney?
Typically, no. So unless the appraiser again notates that there's some wood rot, there's some evidence of termite damage, then they can call for a clear pest inspection, which makes sense. If the lender gets the report back saying that there's pest damage to the property, it makes sense that the lender is going to say, well, we're lending on this. We want to make sure that's clear. So, but VA, it's always required. It is not required on the other loan types unless the appraiser notates it. One thing to keep in mind, and where the out-of-pocket costs do get higher, is based off of the loan type that you're doing and the property type after everything. The property type really matters. If you're doing an investment property, then that appraisal does go up to $750 to $1,000. So because they have to do a separate chunk of the appraisal report based off of what it could rent for. So that's just one thing to keep in mind. And then one other thing is your property type. So if you are doing a manufactured home or a mobile home, then we have to make sure we get an engineering report showing that it is completely safe, affixed to the ground. It's on a fixed foundation. So that runs about $500. We also would need proof that it has some certain things that are like required on the actual property. So there's certain plates that would be on mobile homes that we would have to make sure are there. If they're not there, we have to order a copy of it. So those are certain things that you want to, well inspection, septic inspection. So you just want to make sure based off of your loan type, you work with your lender and just make sure you understand upfront these would be the costs.
Gotcha. Yep. So we're basically walking you guys through the transaction and some of the things that you should be looking at from the very beginning. We started from the very top. The earnest money deposit is the first thing that you're going to be concerned about writing a check for. The home inspection will probably be the second. The appraisal would be the third. But along the lines of timelines, there is one timeline that's super important, and that's the loan contingency. Okay. And because it's a loan, I'm going to let Delaney explain that because she deals with the actual processing of the loan and funding of it. Go ahead.
Absolutely. So like you kind of said, it's abstract, not a science. What I have found over the years is that many agents have different definitions of what a loan contingency is. Technically, a loan contingency is stating that all of the items for the buyer's mortgage have been cleared. So let's say your file's approved and, the underwriter's still asking for pay stubs. They're still asking for a new bank statement. That would show that all of those things have been provided and all of those conditions on your approval have been cleared, except for any, reports on inspections, on any, appraisal. So if the appraisal's not back yet, if they are waiting on repairs to give you a new WDO inspection, those things would not fall inside the loan contingency. But the loan contingency is more for all of the items that the buyer can supply and ensure that are there. I have had instances where I would, this is typically on a contract, it just depends on the length of the contract. If you're doing a 30-day closing, many times they would want to show that everything has been cleared on the loan other than those lender required items, about 15 or 20 days, or 25 days. So we just need to be realistic where up front, I'd look at the contract. If you're waiting to sell a home, then we would just want to be upfront with the sellers and say, hey, all of the items will be cleared on the approval, but we will have an item open to show that they closed their home. So it's all about really being honest. And if there's anything I'm pulling from a 401k, it won't be in my account until 5 days before closing. Well, if that contingency is 10 days before closing, we want to make sure that we are communicating that and saying everything is cleared except for this one item. So it's really just that sealing the deal, saying, okay, all of the loan items are complete and we are good for closing. And it makes sense that a seller would want that prior to the home, obviously closing.
Sure, absolutely. And I think the byproduct of all of that is what we all expect. And it's like, hallelujah, clear to close, right? Is that what comes out of all of this process? Clearing contingencies, making sure that you get everything. The end result is clear to close.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And we are averaging about 15 days for our clear to close. So, which is extremely quick. Like most, if you go to credit unions or online lenders, you're looking at 30 to 45 days. So the fact that we can do a 15-day clear to close is amazing. And we usually can get clear to close on your file before the inspections even come back. I have a mobile home right now that needs all those inspections, and we are completely cleared with all of the buyer's items. We're just waiting on those reports. So we met the loan contingency and we're good to go. And we are cleared to close pending those things. But our goal is to be cleared to close before the loan contingency with all items.
Yeah, and that's a great goal because you don't want to be the buyer that's waiting at the closing table for the clear to close. Mm-hmm. That is a very stressful situation. You want to have this clear to close before the day of closing. And we all look at that. It's like kind of like the final, yes, we're good to close.
The stamp of approval.
Stamp of approval. It's a celebration moment for sure. And then lastly, the last thing that you would need to prepare for, and in terms of the timeline, this would be on the day of closing, you would need to have your funds to close. So what are the funds to close? Your down payment, depending on the type of financing that you get, could be anywhere from 0 if you're doing a VA loan all the way to 20% if you're doing conventional, and everything in between, plus your closing cost. And there are ways to mitigate this. Delaney has down payment assistance programs. She has closing cost assistance programs. She has all of these things, but typically standard, you would want to prepare yourself with your closing costs and your down payment money. And that you would need on the actual day of closing. That's when you sign your closing documents, when you get your keys, when you actually can move into your home, which is the biggest chunk of the investment that you'll have to put up front. Everything else is is a smaller amount than the actual big one that's due on the day of closing, which is your down payment and your funds to close.
Yes. And one thing I like to mention, which is very standard in the mortgage world, is once we get your contract and we send you your initial e-sign disclosures saying, okay, we're under contract, basically all of those are placeholders for what you will sign at closing. And one thing we have to do as lenders is we have to disclose the fees to you that are standard for the area. So we do not have the exact figures to the penny of what every fee will be. We are required to use sample fees. So when I send that initial disclosure out with your funds to close, people always ask, is this exact? And the answer is no. The answer is once we have the title work back for your exact home, then I would adjust those fees and I'd be able to give you an even closer estimate. So that's one thing that people say is, okay, I got this, 30 days before I close. That will be whittled down, but we have to, because we cannot say to you that up front, you don't have this fee and then remove it later. That is illegal. Like, we have to disclose fees to you. And then if we don't need the final inspection, if the seller already has a survey, we can remove those. But yes, your funds to close amount should be given to you hopefully 48 hours before closing. And that is very standard, anywhere from 48 hours to even a week before closing, mostly with my files with getting clear to close so quickly. So that'll give you plenty of time to wire the funds to the title company, and then you would get credits for all of those things you paid up front.
And, I would say also to get that number, obviously from the lender, but double check that with the title company, because your total of funds to close could also, vary depending on the closing costs. Closing costs includes some prorated items such as your taxes and insurance. So we could estimate what your down payment would be, but because these vary by the day of closing, then you would also want to make sure that the title company that's handling the closing has your settlement statement prepared ahead of time. And as a realtor, this is one of the things that I make sure of to eliminate any moment of surprise. So you have plenty of time to prepare, and you know how much you need to prepare to bring. So you would want to know what that number is, but not only check with the lender, also check with the title company to eliminate surprises on that.
Absolutely. And once your loan is cleared to close, we prepare your package, we send it to the title company, and the mortgage company and the title company work together to double check every line item, including the prorations, including everything, to make sure that we both agree at the end of the day, this is what the buyer needs to bring to closing. And then that's when I would give you that final number.
Amazing. All right. So I think we pretty much walked them through an entire purchase transaction. When you think about it, what's the first thing you do? You put down your earnest money deposit, then you go through your home inspection period, you pay for that, then you're moving into appraisals. You'll do your appraisal, which you'll deal with Delaney on ordering that. Lender required inspections, anything else depending on the type of the loan. And then lastly, on the day of closing, your funds to close, which is your down payment and closing costs.
Absolutely.
Pretty thorough. I hope this is helpful. I think it would be for a lot of people.
Yes.
So now tell us about this. It sounds pretty interesting.
Oh, yes. I forgot about this until you pulled it up. So I'll keep this quick since this one's getting a little bit longer than a lot of ours. But basically what this program is that we just rolled out is changing the game for people who have to sell a house. So many times, and Angela can probably echo this for us, but when you are going to make offers on homes as a buyer, if you have a house to sell, you have to list that as a contingency, saying, I want to buy your home, seller, but I have a previous, my current home has to sell.
And that's not always a very competitive offer. It really just depends on the environment. But if you have someone that doesn't have any contingencies competing for the same home with the same seller being the one to make the determination, they might look at the other one more favorably, but this is a way of getting around that. So sorry, go ahead.
No, oh my gosh, that's kind of exactly. I wanted to see kind of what your opinions were on that. But yes, so basically all this is you can pull a home equity line of credit from your current home that you own, so you have a down payment on your new home. We would basically, with this program, there is somebody who will guarantee to buy your home from you if you do not sell it within 90 days after closing. So this would allow you to pull money out of your current home. There's no interest, no payment on that money you pull out to use for your new home, unless it's not repaid within the 90 days. But that will never happen because you have a guaranteed backup offer on the table to sell your home. So this would allow your realtor and it would allow you to move into your new home, have the money for down payment. Your realtor would still list your home for you and have it on the market. And I mean, 9 times out of 10, 8 times out of 10, I really feel like it's going to sell within the 90 days. But this gives you breathing room for you to get into your new home, and it gives you more competitive offers so that you don't have to list that other home on your offers saying that it has to be sold, because you already know last ditch effort, you have somebody who's going to purchase this home. So you don't have to count that mortgage payment against the buyer. You don't have to count that home equity line. You don't have to count anything. You can walk into your new home. So this is a program where you don't have to write offers with contingencies. Now, if you do use this program, then we would just need to make sure that the home is sold and provide those documents to the lender within 90 days after closing. If we go over that 90-day period, that backup offer will kick in, and then the investor would buy your home for about 75% of the value. So you want to make sure that you're working with a realtor that's going to list the home. If you close on your other home before closing on the new home, if you use this to get in the offers and then you actually get a contract on your other home while we're in the process, then we could revert back to that normal rules. But this is just an option for those who are kind of in that in between right now, and maybe they're not ready to list their home. Maybe they want to get in the new home and then get their other home ready to sell. This really answers all of those questions.
And when does the 90 days start ticking, Delaney? Is it when they close on their new home?
Yes. Yep. So the 90 days is when they close on their new home. So they'd count that as your first day. And then you have 90 days after to close on that home and show that somebody has bought the home. If not, then the investor will purchase it for you.
Okay. And could you even list before their home for sale, before their closing of their new home, to even get a little bit more than 90 days?
Absolutely. So you can list it at any point. You could list it even before you go under contract on another home. You can list it in any cases. The 90 days is just after the closing period. So, I mean, you could list it and it could sell within the timelines. You could sell them and sell your house and buy back to back. And then we wouldn't need to use this program. But this is that backup where no matter what, you're covered.
I love that. And I think that this is a really great way of making your offer super strong, even if you did have a home to sell, because now it's no longer a contingency. That's something that, that a seller is going to look at as, oh, this is a buyer that would be much easier to work with than one that might have a home to sell who may not even have it listed, which is probably not a good way to go. You want to at least have your home listed anytime you want to present a contingency like this, or even better, not even have to present it because you have your contingency already covered. That's amazing.
Absolutely. And it's like one of a kind. Not many people are offering this. So it's a really cool program.
Awesome. All right, guys. So that was the real estate content that we had prepared for you guys. I hope this is helpful. If you know of anyone that could benefit from hearing this message, please share it with them. We want to do these videos as a way of adding value to our community, to be able to empower buyers, to take some of the fear out of the market, to really show you guys that these are steps that can be followed. They've proven by millions of people that have bought homes before. So if this is something that you have been wanting to do, whether even you're a first-time home buyer or even someone that bought multiple homes before and have been wanting to upgrade or downgrade or, downsize, whatever, there are ways of doing that. You just need to arm yourself with the right information, the right people on your court too, a good realtor, a good finance agent to help you through all of this.
Yes, want to have those experts, because you wouldn't go and get, try to fill your own cavity. You wouldn't try to go and fix your own. You would go to those experts. So it's really important to have a great realtor and a great lender that really knows the ins and outs.
Totally. All right. So now let's talk about some fun things happening in Jacksonville this weekend. What you got for us, Delaney?
Yes, I'm going to go through these pretty quick. So on tomorrow, March 18th, 10 to 2, there's the 7th annual Active After 50 Expo. So if you are, a little bit more wise, then we could go to this event. Anybody, honestly, but they're going to have, exhibitors, pickleball clinics, live music, dance demos, prize giveaways. So this is a great option. And it is off Alumni Drive downtown. So there's no admission fees. So it is going to be a really cool one with some stuff for those little bit older folks.
I love how you say more experience.
More wise, more life experience. So
I love it.
Yes. And then The next
My
one,
birthday coming up. So I like to think that I am 30 with about 15 more years of experience.
I like that. I love that a lot. And
It's
then
a number, right?
yes, it's all subjective. Like we said, it's abstract. It's not a science.
I love it.
So the next one is a dinosaur adventure. My daughter is 3 and she loves dinosaurs. So this is going to be at the Jacksonville Fairgrounds. And on March 18th, they are doing a dinosaur expo that's going to have exhibits with huge dinosaurs, massive family fun, all of that good stuff.
Where is this happening?
The Jacksonville Fairgrounds.
Okay.
So really it is just all sorts of children's activities, realistic fossil search, race in Jurassic Jeeps, bounce around in bounce houses. So it's just a really, really fun event, and prices do start at $25. It does run tomorrow and Sunday, so Saturday and Sunday. And every ticket does include unlimited activities unless you want your face painted.
Okay. Oh, so there's face painting too?
There's face painting that you would pay extra for, but face painting, there's like dinosaur digs. There's also baby dinosaurs that it says that you can interact with. I'm assuming they would be like, like what are those things called?
Maybe small little alligators. I don't know.
Yes. Yes. So that one's a really fun one, some family fun stuff. I do have 3 really quick items for performers that are coming into Jacksonville. This weekend was so heavy with a ton of different concerts, a ton of different performances. So if that's what you're into, go out there and search. But I picked 3. The first one is Chris, I'm assuming
DeStefano?
DeStefano, thank you. I was like DeStefano. DeStefano. This is a comedian that I absolutely love. He is hilarious. And so I really wish I knew about this one, but it's tomorrow at 7 p.m. and it is at the Jacksonville Center for Performing Arts downtown. And I guarantee you will cry laughing after this one.
Oh, that should be fun to go see.
I know. A little date night, maybe.
Yeah,
It's not for the family. I will say I have seen some of his stuff, but not for the family, for the adults.
Awesome. I like that.
And then just a really quick other one, the Avett Brothers. I didn't know this. They are one of my favorites. I love their music. They're coming to the St. Augustine Amphitheater on tonight and tomorrow. So they have show times starting, the doors open at 6:30 p.m. So this is more of like an acoustic kind of almost folk kind of music. And it is beautiful. And if you haven't been to the amphitheater, you need to go because it is stunning.
Wow. Yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun. A lot of good stuff to get into.
Absolutely. Yes. And it's, date night kind of thing. And then just to appeal to anybody who likes rap music, Future is coming to the Vistor Veterans Memorial Arena on Sunday, the 19th at 7 p.m. So they still have quite a few tickets left. I have it pulled up here. So Sunday at 7, if you want to get some hip hop on, then that's available too. So a heavy weekend with performers, family events, adult events. So you'll have something to do.
Awesome. I love Jacksonville. I really do. I've been here about 19 going on 20 years, and I just find that there's always stuff happening for everyone. There's stuff for the kids, there's stuff for the adults, if you really take the time to look for it, because if you don't, then you could miss it. But I'm going to try to make it to that dinosaur event, and maybe if I'm lucky to the comedian one.
Yes. And there's nothing fancy on my side. I just Google Jacksonville events and kind of dig a little bit and find a couple that are interesting. So there are, dozens more every weekend. So definitely check them out. But yes, Jacksonville is large, diverse, tons of different areas and different things going on.
Yep. That's it. All right, guys. So just to recap what we did today in this video, we talked about the timelines when buying a home. We offered some mortgage info that could help you eliminate those contingencies to make your offers look better. And then we wrapped it up with what's happening in Jacksonville this weekend. So I hope that this was helpful. Lastly, I just want to remind you, if anyone could benefit from this information, please share it with them. It would help us a lot. We do this as a way of adding value to our community. If we could ever help you through the process of buying, selling, or investing in real estate, I hope you think of us as your trusted advisors to help you through that. And until next time, just remember to be kind to one another. and we will see you on the next video.
Bye, guys.
Bye, guys. Take care.